On this episode of Let's Explore This, we will be in Graham County in the far reaches of western North Carolina. We will be exploring what lies here at this intersection of Snowbird and Milltown roads, specifically the little and often forgotten town of Milltown. Firstly, though, there is this map you do need to see. This here is a map that pinpoints the most historic sites in Milltown and the surrounding vicinity. Notice the long curvy line that travels north to south. Most reaches of this here Milltown Road, they lie within the confines of the Trail of Tears National Historic Trail. This is a recognized historic trail that lies not just in Graham County in North Carolina, it traverses through the five counties listed right here. For those of you that don't know, in late May of 1838, members of the United States Army entered the Cherokee homes of western North Carolina, physically removed thousands of Cherokee residents from their homes, and marched them to a series of six nearby impromptu forts or camps. In the late 1990s, the National Park Service forged an agreement with the Trail of Tears Association's North Carolina chapter. With funding from the chapter, two county commissions, and the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, two researchers at the University of North Carolina Research Laboratories of Archaeology were hired to research the history of the Cherokee removal in North Carolina. An emphasis was placed on the removal routes and the various forts and camps where Cherokee were held before being moved to larger camps in Tennessee. This here is a remarkably long report of the Cherokee Trail of Tears in North Carolina. As you can see, covering it in depth would provide enough information for an episode all its own. Therefore, reading this is something you will have to do on your own time. There are, however, a couple of excerpts that should be mentioned in regards to this area, specifically this here, Long Creek. In May of 1838, a fatigue detail of two companies commanded by Captain E. H. Cunningham constructed a military road across the Snowbird Mountains to connect the Chiowa Valley, the future Fort Montgomery, to the state road at Valley Towns. I am not sure if that is supposed to be plural, as if denoting more than one valley town. If that is true, I doubt it would be capitalized. The name Valley Town, it also does denote not only a township, but also the former name of Andrews in Cherokee County. So this Army Road, this old Army Road, which followed an ancient Cherokee trail up Pile Ridge in Cherokee County and down Long Creek in Graham County, it was the main route used for the military deportation of more than 300 Cherokee citizens from the Cherokee Valley in the summer of 1838. Evidence does suggest that the old Army Road built along the Pile Ridge and Long Creek Trail was the only roadway specifically constructed by the Army for use in the Cherokee removal. Substantial segments of the original roadbed are said to survive in the Nantahala National Forest, along Pine Ridge and Upper Long Creek. Now, I hope you followed the blue line down. That is Long Creek. I do not have the time to go traversing its entire length. In the aftermath of the Cherokee removal, Euro American settlement proceeded slowly in the remote Chiowa River Valley. Remaining Cherokee families, however, They did constitute a major component of the area's population as late as 1850. Because this was such a sparsely settled river valley throughout much of the 19th century, neither the state nor Cherokee County attempted to upgrade local transportation routes. So, the old Pile Ridge and Long Creek Military Road did remain the primary access route into the area through the Civil War era. Only after Graham County fissioned from Cherokee County in 1872 and when Robbinsville became the county seat did the state authorize construction of this here Tatham Gap Road to replace that old military track. It can be reached by taking this road, Long Creek Road, many miles past Milltown. Folks, this is the point where Long Creek Road turns into a dirt road. Now, I will state that this is not a road to be driven by the faint of heart. It is probably not recommended unless you have, say, a 4x4. Still, though, I'm doing it anyway. Folks, don't try this at home. Leave this kind of stuff up to the professionals. To the north looms the Snowbird Mountains, green wooded and thicketed with laurel. And in the back of them is nestled the Valley of Chiowa, a word derived from the Cherokee language, meaning otter place. From here, in the valley of Conahit, or the Long Place, a winding dirt track climbs toward the sky to breach the mountain barrier and yoke together in a historic way to the towns of Andrews and of Robbinsville. Folks, for obvious reasons, today this is a road that is little known and seldom traveled. Every foot of its 12 miles, however, is history haunted. It was born not as a highway of hope and promise, but as a road of banishment. Soldiers with bayoneted rifles uprooted and drove people over it in a tragic march into exile during the mid 1800s. Here we are starting to switch sources, focusing now on this here post. So, for the dispossessed Cherokee Indians of Chiowa Valley, it was the first dozen miles of the long and bitter Trail of Tears, a journey to an alien land beyond the Mississippi. This old road, it whispered to the moccasined feet of the aging Chief Junaluska on his flight from Oklahoma and exile to sanctuary or death. He didn't know which, from his beloved homeland. William Holland Thomas, the white trader who saved the mountain Cherokee from extinction, ran pack trains over this here route to supply his trading posts to Robbinsville and to Murphy. With the fall of the Cherokee Nation, settlers began to nurse their wagons over this route to take up land grants in the Chiowa Valley and farm the rich earth that had been the Cherokees from time out of memory. For years after, this road echoed to the sound of creaking wagons and the hollow thuds of hoofbeats. Then came new and better roads, and so this old one, it sank into disuse. It was a horse and buggy thoroughfare, later outmoded by the gasoline age. Of course, eventually came this road, Highway 143, and it would end up becoming one of Graham County's most scenic routes. Today, a large part of it acts as the Cherohala Skyway. These days, this old track is a United States Forest Service road. Some 6 miles of it do run through the Nantahala National Forest. Originally, yes, it was a military road, but at that time it was nothing more. It was built by the soldiers of General Winfield Scott to remove the Cherokees from the Chiowa Valley in 1838 on the first leg of their march into exile. Young James Tatham, he was hired by General Scott to lay out the route between what are now Andrews and Robbinsville. Tatham, who had a keen eye and a sense for contour, surveyed the route without a compass or instruments. The soldiers who followed his line, they hacked it out of a virgin wilderness where their axes mocked a silence as old as Adam. Yes, Adam. I believe that is a reference to Adam and Eve. General Scott, he built a stockade in the Chiowa Valley. This he named Fort Montgomery, and it would later become the town of Robbinsville, which would later become, and now is, the county seat of Graham County. But into that fort he herded some 500 Cherokee men, women, and children. Among them were as follows: George, the chief of Otter Town; Sweetwater, the beloved son of Chiowa; Colsity, Medicine Man; and Crying Bear, the renowned hunter who had helped Andrew Jackson defeat the Creeks at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. That is now a military park in Alabama. When the last of the Cherokees had been rounded up, the soldiers moved them out over the Snowbird Mountains. They were first moved to Fort Delaney, which is now Andrews in Cherokee County, and then to Fort Butler, which is now Murphy, also in Cherokee County. In October of 1838, they began the 1,200-mile trek to Oklahoma and into exile. It was a trek that lasted 6 long, bitter months. There is a sign at the entrance of the road that says the following: Tatham Gap, a part of the Trail of Tears, originally built about 1838 to remove the Cherokee Indians to Oklahoma. Well, the sign, it appears to not say that in those exact words, or at least this one doesn't. Possibly there's a sign somewhere else along the road, maybe on the Cherokee County side. This sign here, though, it certainly does give, in great detail, might I add, what this road was used for. Now, folks, there is one thing that I am not going to do. I am not going to take this road all the way up and over into Andrews. For an episode on a town in Graham County, that is out of bounds. Anyhow, a short distance from this sign, on a hill above Robbinsville's Main Street, lies the grave of Chief Junaluska, who came back from exile over the old road to find sanctuary in his beloved mountains. That grave site is beyond the scope of this particular episode, as it lies in Robbinsville and not near Milltown. But 4 years after his return, in 1847, the state of North Carolina, by special act of the legislature, did make him a citizen and gave him 336 acres of land in the Chiowa Valley and $100 in cash as a reward for his services at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. He died in 1858. Today, this old road, it gets very little traffic. For those who seek out the back roads for peaceful wandering, however, it is a gem in all seasons. In the spring, dogwood, azaleas and laurel bloom in the darkening places. In the summer, this, like many other places, becomes green. In the fall, the trees hang out their battle flags, and in the winter, snow, yes, snow blankets the snowbirds. Winter, though. I'm not sure I would want to travel this road in the winter. I guess, though, that depends. It is kind of winter, well, the start of winter right now. It's just that, at this time, there is no snow or ice, making this road more dangerous than it has to be. Even with that said, one still must ask the question, why am I even traveling this road in the first place? Is this even a good idea? Simply stated, it is the kind of unique dirt track that should be left with the memories and ghosts of the past. Okay, so for such a seemingly small and now largely forgotten town, this episode is still going to be a bit lengthy. You see, there is more to Milltown than just its Native American history. 'Cause this Milltown region, it was once dominated by the Bemis Lumber Company, whose property, plant, worker housing, and other recreational facilities occupied the town. A portion of the plant site has been converted for the county's waste management facility, and several of the plant's buildings are, or were, as of 2013, in the process of being demolished. Okay, well, then this is what is standing here today in 2022. The company's worker housing was constructed on this here Snowbird Road and on this here Milltown Road to the south and to the west of the plant. Overall, there are a number of resources in this region associated with the lumber company that kind of do need some explaining to do. The time has now come to turn to this document, a historical structures report for the Milltown area done in 2013. Since its creation, Graham County, it has struggled with its remote location in the far western end of the state. There has, for years, been a lack of transportation routes. Organization of the county had little effect on economic conditions, which was highly restricted by geographic factors. The sparsely populated county has less farmland than all but Dare County. Dare County? I wonder where that is. Apparently, it is located at the far eastern edge of the state, but overall, approximately 85% of Graham County is forested. In the late 19th century, there were only a few merchants, but a number of small mills, most of which doubled as grain or sawmills, were, in fact, scattered around the county. Sorry, though, no small mills or buildings that resemble a small mill could I find in this immediate vicinity. Probably they don't exist anymore, but reportedly there was once one here on Long Creek. More on that a bit later. With its lack of outside trade, the heavily forested county supported small subsistence farms that produced a wide variety of crops. Due to its remote location, lack of developed transportation routes, and an abundance of hardwood forest, logging became the county's chief industry beginning in the 19th century. Lumber companies, they first cut only the best white pine, yellow poplar, chestnut, cherry, and basswood, and the trees, they had to be within easy distance of a navigable stream, like when no lake ever impounded the Chiowa River. River drives began in the 1880s and continued through the 1890s when rail transportation became more reliable and efficient. One of the first sawmills in the county was operated by John Barker on this here long creek. This here is a photo of John Barker, whom I believe is the taller man on the left. It's not a photo of him at the Long Creek Mill, but at another nearby mill circa 1905. Following its incorporation in the late 19th century, Robbinsville, it grew slowly. The arrival of the first outside lumber companies, Belding, Whiting, of which this photo is of, and others, necessitated the construction of several hotels. The population was only 200 in 1915, but began to grow in the late 1920s. This here is a photo of a Graham County Railroad locomotive. Not sure if it is along the Graham County Railway line, the one that the Bemis Lumber Company purchased in 1926. Regardless, it also operated a connecting line to the Southern Railway at Topton in Cherokee County. The company constructed a large plant and many houses for its workers. Around the same time, the town installed a water system, and the county's first hard surfaced road was opened between Robbinsville and Topton. By 1928, the town's electric light system was powered by the Bemis Lumber Company from its plant. By the end of the decade, Robbinsville's population, it climbed to 500. Yes, folks, this is the building responsible for all of this. You see, the Bemis Hardwood Lumber Company established a presence in Graham County beginning in 1924, when Harry Chapin Bemis purchased lands owned by the Buffalo Realty Company, the Carolina Railway and Lumber Company, and George R. Cottrell. Originally from Pennsylvania, Bemis went into the lumber business in 1903 and began operating a sawmill at Bemis in West Virginia in 1905. Bemis, he acquired additional land from the Whiting Manufacturing Company in 1924. From Whiting's extensive holdings in Graham County, Bemis purchased the Big Snowbird area. The Jennett Lumber Company claimed the Santitla watershed, and Champion Paper took the West Buffalo watershed. Bemis and the Champion Company later agreed to a swap whereby Bemis owned all of the hardwoods and Champion owned all the hemlocks in the Big Snowbird and West Buffalo watersheds. This here is a 1946 photo depicting the Bemis Hardwood Lumber Company logging on Champion Paper and Fiber Company land. And this photo, also from 1946, shows a tract of land after a heavy removal of hemlock. Mr. Bemis, he went on to purchase the outstanding stock of the Graham County Railroad Company, renewed its charter, and completed the line between Robbinsville and Topton. This photo here is of a Shea number 1925. Could this be that very first locomotive that is said to have arrived in Robbinsville in 1925? Not sure, but the company continued to carry freight until the 1970s, when service was discontinued. Initially, the Bemis Lumber Company officially incorporated in the state of Delaware in April of 1926. However, 11 years later, it was succeeded by the Bemis Hardwood Lumber Company, which incorporated right here in North Carolina on January 1st of 1937. Okay, then why the name change? What did they log prior to 1937? softwoods, hardwoods, and softwoods? Then they just moved straight to hardwoods? Not sure. The Bemis Lumber Company began construction of its plant here on Long Creek in 1926, and the first lumber was sawn at the band mill in August of 1927. Most of the machinery and equipment for the plant were shipped to Robbinsville from Bemis Sawmill in West Virginia. The plant, it was steam powered with a centrally located brick boiler house supplying the power. Yes, the company, it did pride itself on the quality of its hardwoods, which were among the finest in the country and in demand from the state's furniture manufacturers. The fully modern plant wasted no part of the logs brought to the mill, sawing logs, chipping the slabs and edges for shipment to the Champion Paper Mill in Canton, and burning the bark and sawdust in the boiler house and dry kilns. Following the death of both Harry Chapin Bemis and Lawrence Crofton Bemis in 1935, the company was left without its senior management. It then faced significant financial challenges. John Bemis Veach, nephew of Harry Bemis, subsequently became president of the company, and Lionel W. Wilson was promoted to vice president and general manager. And this here, folks, it is the house he once lived in. Now, we will get back to the Bemis plant after this brief interruption. The time has now come to discuss the Wilson House, and so the circa 1948 Wilson House occupies a 9.5 acre wooded parcel on the southwest side of Snowbird Road. It is set well back from the road on a sloping site, and the house, it is reached by a winding paved driveway. And the house does rest on an exposed basement that includes two simple garage bays located under its south end. The driveway, it loops in front of the house and terminates at a small parking area just outside the garages. Here, since it is relatively brief, I will provide for you an architectural description. However, this house is on private property and today does appear to be occupied. Therefore, likely, I will have to resort to the use of photos. The one-story hip-roof dwelling, it holds a brick veneer exterior displaying decorative elements of the colonial revival type. The central block, it is flanked by side wings that are set back with a screen porch that projects from the north end of the north wing. Although today, in 2022, that appears to have been enclosed. A projecting bay on the south wing. It features a corner constructed of structural glass block. There are two interior brick chimneys that hold corbelled caps. A decorative front gable does mark the location of the central entrance, which is reached from an uncovered stoop that carries across the facade. Steps do descend from the south side of the stoop and connect to that driveway so near the garage. A wrought iron balustrade on the stoop does feature a radial design at the center. The single leaf entry door, it is framed by a classically inspired and heavily molded surround, and that surround, it features chamfered pilasters, a paneled entablature, and a stylized swan-necked open pediment. A four-light transom does top the paneled wood door, and the entrance bay, it is flanked by large picture windows on the facade. The remaining windows on the main level, however, are typically 8 over 8 and 6/6 double-hung sash. 4 light windows, they do appear in groups to illustrate the basement. According to tax records, the house appears to have been built around 1948 for Lionel and Bertha Wilson. Mr. Wilson, a longtime officer of the Bemis Lumber Company, purchased lots in Milltown from the Bemis Company in 1935 and in 1936. Wilson. He worked for the company from 1927 until his death in 1965. He first served as assistant secretary and treasurer of the company, before rising to vice president and general manager in 1935. He served in that capacity for nearly 30 years. During the last few years of his tenure with the company, however, he became the president, which will be briefly discussed once we get back to the Bemis plant itself. Furthermore, around Robbinsville, he was active in business and civic affairs. He was a founding member and the first president of the Robbinsville Lions Club, though not shown in this photo, serving 2 terms from 1937 to 39. Mr. Wilson, he died in 1965, and this house, it then passed to his heirs. The Wilson House. It has come to be a relatively late example of the colonial revival style, which was one of the most popular architectural styles for residential construction in the first half of the 20th century, and it is one that seems to predict the growing popularity of more modern residential forms. Although the decorative elements of the Wilson House do suggest colonial revival style embellishments, the one-story hip-roofed form points to the growing popularity of more modern materials and open floor plans. In a county dominated by the persistence of more traditional building practices into the 20th century, this house stands out as a somewhat unique example of a colonial revival style residence. As Michael Ann Williams noted in this architectural survey, Graham County had relatively few historic structures compared to others in the state. She attributed the relative scarcity to the county's small size, a lack of good agricultural land, a low density of population, and a high proportion of land owned by the federal government. As such, the Wilson House, it certainly does stand out among other residential properties in Graham County for its decorative elements in the colonial revival style. Among the previously other recorded in the county, only 2 other structures display similar features and such stylistic references. One is the Graham County Courthouse, and the other, it is the Tapoco Lodge. So, the Wilson House. Yes, it does represent an uncommon application of the colonial revival style on a residence in Graham County, which is so dominated by vernacular log or frame houses and craftsman-inspired dwellings. Yes, the colonial revival style. It is one of the most popular residential styles across much of North Carolina. Its presence, however, appears only sparingly in this county of Graham. Oh, yes, the tribulations of moving west. You see, the historical antecedents of colonial revival architecture, they likely held little sway with this county's population, which could have been more attuned to the ideas of simplicity in natural materials associated with craftsman houses, or the economy of size, or the decoration emerging in minimal traditional and ranch houses of the mid-20th century. The Wilson House, it is one of the most distinctive mid-20th century residences in the larger Robbinsville area. The property is, however, not so likely to yield much further information about the county's past, not otherwise accessible from other extant resources and written records. Simply stated, there are other surviving resources of the Bemis Lumber Company that also share association with Wilson's productive life. Prior to World War II, the Bemis Lumber Company accounted for almost all of the industry in Graham County. The company supplied electric power to the town of Robbinsville. It provided housing for its employees. It operated a commissary, and it offered a community picnic ground. So here is a map. Notice the picnic ground. It's like supposed to be like right around this vicinity. So I'm assuming just maybe this is it over here. Yeah, I'm not exactly certain if this is the area where it is or was located, though there is definitely a picnic table inside that gazebo thingy. Other than that, it looks like a house or something here, so I don't know. It definitely looks like it could have been big enough for picnic grounds. I surely would be nice to have something like that along Long Creek. Reportedly, it is said to still be here, but where? I did find a smaller area nearby with a fire pit. It seemed a bit out of bounds, though. Sorry, you're not going to see that, but nothing else up here looks like it could have been once acting as a picnic ground, but who knows? During its 64 years in operation, it is estimated that Bemis produced 550 million board feet of hardwood lumber. Provided housing for its employees, though. Let's delve a bit more in depth into that. Firstly, though, there is something that I must say. This, folks, is where things are going to get a bit wonky. As this housing is discussed in greater detail, the reasons for why will become more clear. Do not say that I didn't warn you. Anyhow, the Milltown Road housing, it is a small collection of 11 houses constructed by the Bemis Lumber Company for its employees. Erected in the late 1920s on both sides of this here Milltown Road, this group of houses was part of the Milltown subdivision built by the company, hence the likely reason why this region has even come to be known as Milltown. Another group of houses, those known as Lower Milltown, was located on the northeast side of Snowbird Road, to the northwest of its intersection with Milltown Road. Here, in the so-called Lower Milltown, however, even fewer houses remain standing. Regardless, whether or not this area should be referred to as Milltown or Milldale is unclear. This is where things are going to get a bit wonky. The Milldale subdivision of worker houses appears to have been located further southeast along Ottawa Avenue, Walters Avenue, and Long Creek Road. It is, however, unclear as to how much of this development was ever built. In the 1960s, the Bemis Lumber Company began selling the houses it built for its workers. Michael Ann Williams recorded the Milltown Road housing in July of 1997, but did not include any specific description of the houses. The houses she went on to photograph are located about a third of a mile southeast of the intersection of Milltown and Snowbird Roads. Yes, I do have the report, but I do not have the photos included. That's fine, I guess, as I suspect they are probably within this group. These houses are said to be uniformly one-story, side gable frame dwellings with attached shed roof entry porches and 3/1 double-hung sash windows. Could these here be those houses? Not sure. Now, though, here comes the wonky part. At first, I thought Ottawa Avenue, as shown on this map, may have been the very nearby Ottawa Road or Ottawa Circle. Further evidence, though, suggests likely not. It is not even known but believed that the 9 houses recorded by Miss Williams were part of which this is probably here, not one. Surely it is part of the Milltown Road complex. It just kind of looks cool. But what of those 9 recorded houses of the Milldale subdivision? Well, Ottawa Avenue, shown on the plat map of that subdivision, was an extension of what is now present day Milltown Road. Extension? Yeah, maybe. Notice the little extension thingy called NC 1133 on this map. So, that curvy little thing, could it be the curvy thing shown here on the plat map as Walters Avenue? Yes, this one, it veers up and to the left, and this one curves down and to the right. Yes, but then, whoever drew this map did so with north pointing downward. If both curvy lines are one and the same, then Ottawa Avenue and Milltown Road are, in this stretch, one and the same. Okay then, I wonder if this thing here may have been Cove Street. I have to say, this Milldale area, I guess as it was once called, does today hold a number of open clearings. Maybe they held houses at one time. Yes, those ranchy things, they kind of do look newer. No, I don't think they're the ones that were recorded by Miss Williams, but just maybe that is one of those over there. That looks like it is pretty old. Maybe that is one of those 9 houses that were photographed. Maybe there are one or two here that are still standing. That house, yes, it does not look occupied today. And here is a full on view of the facade. Yes, there are a couple of more houses over here lying next to it. You know what, though? I don't have a lot of time on this episode of extra stuff. You know, though, it is said that the previously recorded houses do differ in character from the group of 11 surviving craftsman influenced houses located nearer to the Snowbird intersection. Those are confirmed to be a part of the Milltown subdivision, so a plat map and a longtime resident and property owner has stated. Wait a minute. That definitely is a side gabled house, but look at the window. Doesn't that look like a 3/1? You know what? I bet that is one of those 9 recorded houses. I have to say, today there are certainly not 9 of those lying around. I bet that is one of those last houses left standing. Not entirely sure, but back to the company itself. After years of stability and prosperity, changes began to occur in the 1960s that signaled shifts in the economy, manufacturing industry, and ultimately the fortunes of the company. Beginning in the 1960s, the company sold off its employee housing. Lionel W. Wilson succeeded Veach as president for a few years prior to Mr. Wilson's death in 1965. Then, in March of 1967, a fire destroyed the plant's band mill, which was quickly replaced by a modern electric band mill. The plant largely abandoned its steam-powered production. The timber holdings in the county that supported the mill were sold at auction in 1971, making the plant dependent on timber from the United States Forest Service. New ownership acquired the mill operation in 1972 when the facility was purchased by Whitewater Incorporated. The plant transferred between new owners several times during the 1980s before it was closed and sold in 1990. As stated a bit earlier, the document used for this portion of the episode does date back to 2013. Today, in 2022, this is what still stands. Today, the physical remnants of the Bemis plant present an incomplete picture of the company's importance in the industrial history of Graham County, along with the hydroelectric plants at Chioa, Santitla, and Fontana. The Bemis Hardwood Lumber Company plant is one of only a few surviving industrial sites from the first half of the 20th century in the county. Several other manufacturing plants are located in the county, including this here, also in the Milltown area, the Stanley Furniture Plant. These resources, however, date from the second half of the century, therefore, they offer little in the way of comparison to the Bemis plant. Still, what happened to this plant? Well, unfortunately, I am not going to go in depth into it. This article, however, will tell you all about it. The Bemis Hardwood Lumber Company plant. It was one of the most important industrial sites in Graham County for much of the 20th century. From the beginning of its construction in 1926 to the closing and sale of the plant in 1990, the plant had a tremendous impact on the local economy and offered employment to a significant number of people in the county. Due to its prominent role in the county's development through the 20th century, one would think the plant could be considered a historic treasure. However, due to substantial changes at the plant's site in the past 2 decades, only the Bemis Company office, this building here, retains sufficient integrity to be considered a true historic treasure. The integrity of the site has been significantly compromised by the loss of the original sawmill, which was destroyed by fire in 1967. The brick boiler room and fuel house survived until more recent years when the large stepped gable buildings and noticeable twin chimneys were demolished. The band mill built to replace the original after the 1967 fire, it has also been demolished. Unfortunately, it is in those now demolished buildings where much of the company's work took place. Furthermore, while the office building was built at a distance from the plant's operations, the placement of mobile home trailers to the east of the office on the banks of Long Creek further removes this building from the core of the plant site. The shop building and the long center passage shed are among the few relatively intact structures located within the core of the plant site that do retain a good degree of historic integrity. Their ancillary role in the manufacturing process, however, does diminish their significance. The office building, it is what retains the highest degree of integrity and the most direct association with the operation of the company. Furthermore, the Bemis Company office, it is a good, intact example of a 1920s brick structure that blends elements of the colonial revival and craftsman styles. Built on a domestic scale, the office is a 1.5 story clipped gable hip roof building with a symmetrical facade. There are flared eaves, curved rafter tails, and decorative purlin brackets. There is a recessed single-leaf entry with sidelights. There is also a 4/1 double-hung sash. Overall, the building does retain a high degree of integrity of setting, location, workmanship, design, feeling, and association. Representing the organization and administration of the company, this office building, it still holds the ability to successfully convey the period of significance of the Bemis Hardwood Lumber Company. The north end of the property was sold or leased to Graham County around 2000 for use as a waste management facility. Other than that, many of the buildings do not appear to be in the greatest condition, but not dilapidated beyond repair. A few appear to be used as storage. Yes, the document does provide an architectural description. In order to keep this episode no longer than an hour and a half, however, I will not be covering that, at least not in depth. We must now move into the late 20th century. There, little diversification of the county's economy has occurred. Even today, Graham County remains relatively isolated from the rest of the region. The remote location and sparse population, however, do, these days, attract a good number of tourists and outdoor recreation enthusiasts, all drawn to the county's natural and scenic attractions. With a significant amount of the county given over to national forests and conservation areas, Graham County continues to be defined largely by its landscape. Okay, so I think now is as good a time as any to find a place to turn around on Tatham Gap Road. Now, I am a few miles up. Simply stated, there are not many places to turn around, and yes, there is barely enough room for two cars. Here, you do not want to back up anywhere around here, but I did come up, and now I must go back down. Yes, folks, I actually did find a place to turn around, albeit barely. However, I do not think it would be a good idea to travel this road in the rain. Yeah, that probably would be a very bad idea. But now, folks, that time has come. That time to move on to wherever it might be, to our next destination.